Hi boys and girls. Today we're going to continue with Frindle by Andrew Clements, and today we're going to read chapter 14. And so we're almost there, one more chapter and we'll finish. If you remember, we left off on chapter 13 where Nick, the author, left us with this sentence that said, the only person who couldn't quite forget about everything was Nick. Because there was a lot of stuff going on in his city. Remember, they even made a sign that said, welcome to Westfield, home of the Frindle. Remember this picture? And so we left off wondering why Nick couldn't quite forget about everything. It said the only person who couldn't quite forget about everything was Nick. And a lot of stuff had happened. He went on shows. He went on Good Morning America, The Late Show. And so a lot of stuff had happened. And so today we're going to find out chapter 14, what's going on. What else is going on with our book, Frindle? Is the war over? Do people say Frindle instead of Pan? Let's see what happened. So chapter 14 is called Inside Nick. And so in this chapter, I'm thinking it's called Inside Nick because we're going to learn about Nick and how he's feeling, what is he thinking, what are his emotions, what's going on with him, because it's called Inside Nick. So it's not it's what's going on inside of him, how is he feeling, what are his emotions, what is he thinking. And so this chapter, boys and girls, this chapter, well, a lot of the chapters are my favorite chapters, but this is one of the chapters that is really special to my heart. And there's a part that is so special. I just love that part. And we'll get there and you will see why I love that part. And so let's go ahead and get started with this chapter. It's called Inside Nick. On the outside, Nick was still Nick. But inside, it was different. Oh, sure, he still had a lot of great ideas, but now they scared him a little. You see, right away, the author tells us, on the outside, Nick was still Nick, but inside, it was different. Oh, sure, he still had a lot of great ideas, but now they scared him a little. For instance, Nick learned in social studies class, that people who buy stuff are called consumers. If consumers stop buying, stores and shops and restaurants go out of business. Then, boom, a new idea hit him. All the kids love lunchtime, but the awful part about lunch was the eating part, school food. And the food was never a surprise. You had to smell it all morning and then go eat it. The food was always bad. Well, thought Nick, so this is his idea, this is what he thought. Well, thought Nick, the school cafeteria is sort of like a restaurant, isn't it? And the students are the consumers, right? And we don't really have to buy our lunches there, do we? Nick could see it all. He would get all the kids to bring their lunches from home every day until the ladies who made the lunches cooked very good food. He was sure those women didn't cook food like that for their own families. The kids were the consumers with $1.35 in their pockets. And until the food was better, that's where their money would stay. Great idea. Nick was sure it would work, and he got all excited about it. But then Nick remembered what had happened with Frindle. It stopped him cold. He was sure that if all the kids stopped buying lunch, sooner or later someone would figure out that it was all of Nick Allen's idea. He would get in trouble. People would write about it in the newspapers. The principal would call his parents. Anything could happen. And so, for the first time in his life, Nick kept a good idea to himself. He never even told John or Chris. Oh, this is so sad. See, this is making me sad already because Nick had another great idea. Because what he learns in school, or whatever he learns in each class, he wants to apply it. He wants to do what he's learning. But he had a great idea about changing the food in the cafeteria. But he stopped because he thought to himself, wait a minute. If I do that, then it's going to start all over again like what happened with Frindle. And he didn't even tell his ideas to his friend. So that makes me sad. And that changed Nick. See, he's now afraid. Says, and that changed Nick. Let's find out how it changed him. His mom was the first to notice. Are things okay at school, honey? She asked one day in early March. He had seemed kind of down, a little sad, and it worried her. See, as moms, we know when something is bothering you. We know when you are feeling sad. And so his mom, Nick's mom, noticed right away, and she said, are things okay at school, honey? Everything is okay. Everything is fine. Everything is okay with your friends? They haven't been hanging around here very much. Mom, honest, everything's fine. It's winter. Everyone's really busy with hockey and basketball, that's all. And Nick went to his room and shut the door. But see, Mom knew that something is wrong, that something is bothering Nick. Mrs. Granger noticed the change too. That clever little rascal who had looked her in the eye and said, but I really didn't have a Frindle with me. That boy wasn't in her class anymore. Well, it doesn't mean literally that he wasn't in her class. He was in her class. But he wasn't the same boy that she had met on that first day or through, or when all this Frindle stuff started. See, as teachers, we also know when something is up and when something is bothering you. You know, I've asked you before, like, you okay? Depending who you are. And I noticed when you were feeling sad or when you were feeling mad or when you just woke up and, and things like that. Because as teachers, we can tell that, just like moms can tell, and dads too. But as teachers, we can tell too. And so Mrs. Granger noticed the change in Nick. Okay, that boy, the little rascal who looked her in the eye and said, but I really didn't have a Frindle with me. That boy wasn't in her class anymore. Now, a quieter, more careful Nicholas Allen came into class every day. He did all of his work perfectly, didn't speak unless she called on him, and didn't laugh and joke with his friends like he used to. School would be over in a few months, and it seemed like there was nothing she could do to help him. See, summer is coming to an end. It's kind of like us. School is coming to an end in a few more weeks. And so, and this was happening to Nick in 5th grade. Toward the end of the year, Nick remembered the letter that Mrs. Granger had asked him to sign on the back when the Frindle business was just getting started. Remember that envelope? And I showed you the example, right? He remembered about that envelope. The chess game was over, so he was expecting to get that letter from Mrs. Granger any day now. But all spring it didn't come, so he thought she must have forgotten about it. And he's like, and school's coming to an end, and she hasn't given me that envelope. Nick was afraid to bring it all up again, but he was dying of curiosity to find out what was inside that envelope. So on the last day of school, Nick knocked on Mrs. Granger's classroom door. She was straightening up the textbooks on the bookcases below the windows. Without turning around, she sang out, "Come in." Nick said, "Hi, Mrs. Granger." Mrs. Granger stood up and turned to face him. "Oh, it's you, Nicholas. I'm so glad you stopped by. I've been meaning to talk to you, and this will save me having sent you a letter this summer." Nick gulped and said, "That's what I came here for, the letter." Mrs. Granger looked puzzled for half a second and then said, "Oh, that letter." Then she paused. You recall, Nicholas, that I said I would send you that letter when all of this was over, and it's not over." "It's not?" Nick tilted his head to one side and asked, "When will it be over?" Mrs. Granger smiled and said, "Oh, believe me, Nicholas, you will know when it's over. So it's not over yet. The Frindle and Pan war, the war between Mrs. Granger and Nicholas, is not over. So that's not what she wants to talk to him about. And so Nicholas is like, wait, it's not over? When will it be over? Mrs. Granger smiled and said, oh, believe me, Nicholas, you'll know when it's over. I wanted to talk to you about something else. I wonder what she wants to talk to him about. She walked across the room and stood about 2 feet from him. Nick had grown during the year, and their eyes were almost on the same level. Remember that Mrs. Granger is short, right? And throughout the year, Nicholas grew, just like some of you are growing too. Like when you came, you were, you have grown a few inches, I'm sure. And so now he kind of can see her eye to eye. It was at the same level. Nick noticed that the eyes were softer, but just as powerful. And so she tells him this. This is very important. I've noticed that you've been very quiet for the past few months. You know, Nicholas, you didn't do anything wrong this year. I know a lot of things happened, and a lot of things were said. And you must have had some difficult days here and there. But your idea was a good idea. And I have been very proud of the way you behaved most of the time. Notice that she adds there, most of the time. So she is so proud of him. She tells him, I'm going to read this paragraph again because it comes from Mrs. Granger's heart. And this is, remember all through the book we've been talking about that Mrs. Granger, deep inside, she's very proud of Nick, but she just doesn't want to show it because it's still a battle between her and Nick and who's going to win, Pan or Frindle. But because it's the last day of school, she tells him this. Let me reread it. I've noticed that you've been very quiet for the past few months. You know, Nicholas, you didn't do anything wrong this year. I know a lot of things happened, and a lot of things were said, and you must have had some difficult days here and there. But your idea was a good idea. See, she approves. And I have been very proud of you and proud of the way you behave most of the time. Nick was embarrassed, but Mrs. Granger kept on talking, so she's telling him more. And Nicholas, you have great things to do in this life. I'm absolutely sure you do. And you mustn't let a few hard days trick you into climbing up. Then Mrs. Granger reached out and shook Nick's hand and looked him in the face. Her eyes were turning up brighter than Nick had ever seen them before. Then she said this. Nicholas Allen, I have enjoyed having you as a student. Now you go out there and have a wonderful summer, and I expect to hear remarkable things about you young men. I love this. I love what Mrs. Granger says to Nick. Let me reread it again because it's the last day of school. And she says this to him. Nicholas Allen, I want you to put your name there and pretend that I'm saying this to you. So she said, you write your name. I have enjoyed having you as my student. Now you go out there and have a wonderful summer. And I expect to hear remarkable things about you, young man or young girl, okay? So did you put your name in there? Because that's what I want to say to you. I know summer is not over, or we're not done with school yet, but I do want you to know that I am so proud of you, and I have enjoyed being your teacher, even if it's through here, reading my read-alouds to you. I love doing my read-alouds in class when we would sit at the rug and we would talk to each other, but I have enjoyed doing my read-alouds here by the pool, and I hope that you have enjoyed them too. And so again, Mrs. Granger says these things to Nicholas, but I want you to think that it's me saying this thing to you personally, whether you're a boy or a girl, okay? So let's go back to Mrs. Granger. So she said, Nicholas Allen, I have enjoyed having you as a student. Now you go out there and have a wonderful summer, and I expect to hear remarkable things about you, young man." Mrs. Granger watched Nick start to leave, but before he got to the door, he turned and said, "Thanks, Mrs. Granger. You have a great summer too." Then he grinned and said, "And don't forget to buy some new Frindles for next year." See, Nick is back. Remember that he was down and he didn't want to come up with new ideas? But when Mrs. Granger talked to him and said all those wonderful, encouraging words to him, the old Nick came back out of him. Remember, that's why the title is called Inside Nick. Nick was feeling down. He was feeling sad. He didn't want to share his ideas. But now that Mrs. Granger approved of him, gave him encouraging words, and said, you didn't do anything wrong. Your idea was a great idea. Now you go out there and conquer the world, young man. And so now Nick is Nick again. And then on his way out, he says, "Thanks, Mrs. Granger. You have a great summer too." Then he grinned and said, "And don't forget to buy some new Frindles for next year." And thanks to his little talk with Mrs. Granger, along with a healthy dose of summer vacation, Nick made a full recovery. He was proud that he had made up a new word, and he enjoyed thinking about all the commotion it had stirred up. That one little word that made the fifth grade year to remember. See, he was so happy now. The fact that Mrs. Granger, she approved of him and how much she valued him, that made him feel very good about himself and proud of himself. And he thought, okay, I came up with that idea of pen being called a Frindle. And so he's so excited. And so that one little word had made fifth grade year to remember. He had a great year. And so before he started sixth grade, Nick was Nick again. And all through junior high and high school and college, he proved it. Did you notice what happened here? What did the author do? He just kind of jumped all the way to sixth grade and junior high and high school. So I don't know what's going to happen next. Like, pay very close attention. I'm not done with the chapter, but look what happened. Before he started sixth grade, Nick was Nick again. And all through junior high and high school and college, he proved it. For example, 2 years later, all the cafeterias in town were serving delicious food at least 4 days a week, all because of Nick, the consumer. And the state superintendent of schools had made a special trip to Westfield to learn why this little town had the most successful school lunch program in the state. Remember that idea that he had at the beginning? That what he learned in social studies, and he wanted to change the cafeteria food, but then he stopped because he was afraid. But now that he had talked to Mrs. Granger and she encouraged him and he feels that he has her approval, he went ahead with that idea that he had. And so now the cafeterias, at least it started in his school, the cafeteria food is a lot better now. And in high school, well, the stories about Nick's other adventures could go on and on and on. But that would delay the end of this story, the one that started when Nick was in fifth grade. Now, that's not the end yet, okay? But look what Andrew Clements does. He says, and in high school, well, the stories about Nick's other adventures could go on and on and on. But that would delay the end of this story, the one that started when Nick was in fifth grade. So if he was to write about all the things that Nick did throughout junior high and high school, then this book wouldn't have 15 chapters. It would probably have 20 or 25 chapters. And Andrew Clements said, no, I'm not going to write all of that. So he just said, okay, it would delay the story. Because the end of this story came later, 10 years later. Not done yet, one more paragraph, but look what happened. It says, because the end of this story came later, 10 years later. Remember, we met Nick back in 3rd grade, right? When he turned the classroom into a tropical island. And we met him there. Then in 4th grade, making the sound of the birds. And then in 5th grade, in the middle, and then Frindlemania, right? The pen into, turn pen into Frindle. But remember I told you at the beginning of this story that this book starts in 3rd grade and it goes on and on and on all the way to when Nick is older. I didn't want to tell you the whole story, remember? But this is what happens. It says the end of the story came later, 10 years later. Wait, what's going to happen 10 years later? I want you to stop there for a moment, though. I want you to think about yourself. Put yourself 10 years from now. Visualize yourself. What are you going to be doing 10 years from now? Are you going to be finishing high school? Are you going into college? Did you finish your first year of college? I'm not doing the math. I think you're going to be out of high school, or maybe getting ready to go into college, or maybe in your first year of college. So think about it 10 years from now. Or maybe you're going to be working somewhere already. So maybe you're going to be working and going to college, or maybe you're just going to be working, or I don't know what you're going to be doing 10 years from now. Think about it. Visualize yourself. Where are you going to be 10 years from now? And so what happened to Nick? Let's see. And what was happening to Nick's word during these 10 years? What was happening? Nothing fancy, nothing exciting. Words don't work that way. Words either get used or they don't. And Frindle was being used more and more. It was becoming a real word. In 10 years. So 10 years, everybody uses the word Frindle, but it's not considered a real word yet. Until it's in the, remember, what is the thing that Mrs. Granger loves so much? The dictionary. Remember I told you the dictionary is very important in this story. Remember, it's not considered a real word until it's in the dictionary. Remember, like the word selfie and hashtag, remember I told you those things, right? Well, the word Frindle, in 10 years, people use it, and it was becoming a real word, but not yet. Maybe in chapter 15. That's the end of chapter 14, okay? So I love this chapter because Nick gets encouraged by his teacher, and because his teacher tells him that he didn't do anything wrong and that he had a great idea, that encouraged him back to be Nick, to be who he was to begin with. And that's what I want you to be. I want to encourage you to be the best that you can be, and that you can do whatever you put your mind to it. You can do whatever you want to do, and you can be whoever you want to be when you grow up, but you have to work very hard. Okay, boys and girls? And so that's the end of chapter 14. We have one more chapter, and we'll finish this book, and it'll be a very exciting ending. Well, at least I think it's for me. I love the ending. And so don't forget to answer the questions, and I will see you next time. Bye, boys and girls.